Hey guys, tonight, we're slipping behind the heavy wooden doors of a medieval monastery, where silence is golden soup is considered a delicacy, and bells ring so often you might start dreaming in chimes. Picture this, it's still pitch black outside, the kind of darkness that feels solid, and suddenly clang. A bell explodes into your dreams, echoing through cold stone halls. You jolt awake in a narrow cot wrapped in itchy wool, breath puffing in the freezing air. Welcome to the sacred and mildly chaotic world of monastic life. You probably won't survive this with your sanity intact, but hey, neither did half the novices. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before dawn, not just before sunrise early. Think 2:30 a.m. early. And it's not the rooster crowing, this is the matins bell, a deep, unrelenting clang designed to yank you out of sleep like a celestial alarm clock with no snooze button. Your eyes barely open, your limbs still stiff with cold and sleep, and yet you move. Because you must. The rule of Saint Benedict doesn't really leave room for 5 more minutes. The stone floor feels like ice as you swing your feet down. You fumble for your habit in the dark layer upon scratchy layer of wool and shuffle out of your dormitory, trying not to bump into Brother Thomas, who somehow always manages to walk straight even when half asleep. The corridor is dim, lit only by the flickering torchlight of a passing novitiate on candle duty. Every sound is amplified in this quiet, the squeak of sandals, the swish of robes, the collective groan of bones not meant to wake at this hour. You file into the chapel. It's enormous and silent, and the scent of centuries-old incense clings to every surface. You take your place in the choir stalls. No pews here, just hard wooden benches that make your knees ache. The chanting begins. It's matins, the first of the divine offices, a solemn arrangement of psalms, readings, and responses, sung in Latin, and often in near total darkness. You try to follow along, but the words swirl together like fog. Your voice comes out hoarse, and a few monks are clearly mouthing the words without sound. Hey, effort counts, right? There's something timeless in this moment. The chants Gregorian, though that term won't even exist for another few centuries, rise and fall in haunting unison. You don't understand every word, but you feel the weight of it. This is worship through rhythm, repetition, and surrender. Historians still argue whether these early chants developed organically from oral tradition or were carefully systematized by monastic reformers for uniformity. Either way, they're mesmerizing and slightly hypnotic. You catch yourself nodding off during Psalm 51, Miserere me Deus, only to snap back as Brother Gerald subtly elbows you in the ribs. He's been here 20 years and still can't stay awake during the antiphons. Matin stretches on for what feels like eternity, but it's probably only about an hour and a half, or 2. Who's counting when time is measured in bells and prayers? Eventually, the service blends into lauds, the dawn prayer, as the first hints of morning spill through the high, narrow windows like diluted gold. You squint at it, your body begging for breakfast, but the next step is more prayer. Yes, more. But there's a pause, a brief window after lauds, before the day truly begins. You're allowed to return to your cell, though calling it a cell might be giving it too much flair. It's more like a monk-sized closet with a bed, a stool, and maybe, if you're lucky, a tiny writing desk with an oil lamp. You sit on the edge of your cot, rubbing your eyes, willing yourself to stay alert. You think about sneaking in a few minutes of sleep, but the bell for prime is only half an hour away, and you've been warned better to go tired than go late. It's in this quiet interim that you hear something odd, a faint snore, It's coming from Brother Mark's cell across the hall. He's definitely fallen asleep in full robes, probably slumped against his desk. You grin. Even in strict monasteries, human nature wins sometimes. Here's a quirky fact. In some abbeys, monks were actually encouraged to sleep in their habits to avoid the sin of overcomfort. That meant no undressing ever. Just imagine the laundry situation. Or rather, don't. The bell rings again, this time for prime the third canonical hour, and you're on your feet. Slowly, reluctantly, but you go. Because you're a cog in this ancient machine, and when the gears turn, you move. The others are already filing toward the chapel, hoods pulled up, faces pale. A few exchange glances, the closest thing to rebellion you'll see before sunrise. You take your place once more, and the chanting begins again. Psalms, prayers, more psalms. You start to memorize the cadence, not because you're trying to, but because your brain has no choice. And just as your stomach growls loud enough for Brother Simon to raise an eyebrow, the final Amen of prime fades into the stone, and the monks rise, robes rustling like autumn leaves. Time for the first meal, though calling it a meal might be generous. As you shuffle toward the refectory, the long dining hall with its high arched ceiling and no-nonsense benches, you're struck by how much of this life is lived in rhythm. Sleep, prayer, movement, pause. Even your breath starts to sync with it. That quiet chaos, the constant shuffle of bells and duties is maddening and somehow soothing. Like a river always flowing, whether you're ready or not. The day has barely started, and already you've sung 2 hours of psalms, knelt for half a dozen prayers, and considered whether cold porridge counts as a form of penance. And yet oddly, you're settling in. Because in this world, even exhaustion becomes a kind of prayer. The refectory is dim, long, and not quite warm enough to convince you that you're indoors. Tall windows let in a sliver of pre-dawn light, casting the long wooden tables in a soft, smoky gray. You sit where you're assigned, always the same spot, no musical chairs in the monastery. Across from you, Brother Linus is already bowing his head, hands tucked into his sleeves. The room is nearly silent save for the scrape of benches and the faint gurgle of someone's perpetually upset stomach. Breakfast, or what passes for it, is already waiting in wooden bowls, a chunk of coarse rye bread that feels like it could double as a weapon, and a cup of weak ale or watered-down wine. Sometimes, if the monastery is particularly lucky or has a generous benefactor, you'll find a sliver of cheese that's more rind than anything edible. Today, no such luxury. Just the bread, the ale, and the gnawing knowledge that you won't eat again until well after midday. You break your bread quietly. No idle chatter here. The rule of St. Benedict makes it clear mealtimes are for spiritual reflection, not gossip. But they've worked out a clever compromise. A designated reader, usually someone with a decent voice and the ability to pronounce Latin without sounding like they're choking, is up at the front reciting from Scripture, or occasionally the lives of saints. Today, it's the story of Saint Simeon Stylites. You know, the guy who lived on top of a pillar for nearly 40 years. Not relatable content, but it does put your cold breakfast in perspective. Historians still argue whether Simeon was a pioneer of holy endurance or just really into personal space. Either way, his life is being narrated in a monotone that makes even Brother Sebastian nod off with one eye open. Still, there's something calming about it. The voice becomes a hum in the background, another strand in the tapestry of monastic rhythm. Your jaw aches from chewing, but the bread must be finished. It's part of the portioning, and wasting food is not just frowned upon, it's borderline blasphemous. The ale washes it down in gulps that feel more medicinal than enjoyable. No one lingers. As soon as the abbot gives the subtle signal, just a glance and the smallest nod, the benches begin scraping back in unison. You rise, bow slightly, and file out back into the gray corridors of your stone world. By now, the sun is finally up. Pale beams of light sneak through the narrow windows, lighting up the dust that never quite settles. The monastery is built for contemplation, not comfort. The stones under your feet are worn smooth from centuries of sandals, but they still manage to feel uneven every time you walk them. You pull your cloak tighter. It doesn't help much. You make your way toward the choir stalls for the next round of chants. You've lost count already, and it's not even mid-morning. You step inside the chapel again. This time your voice feels stronger. Maybe the bread helped. Maybe your body has just surrendered. The acoustics are haunting. Every chant reverberates through the vaulted ceilings, echoing back as if sung by monks long dead. It's beautiful in the way old echoing spaces always are, just spooky enough to make you wonder if there's a ghostly monk lurking behind the altar. You've never seen one, but Brother Marcus swears he did during Lent. Or maybe he was just sleep-deprived, which frankly you all are. Here's something quirky you might not expect. The chants you're singing have no musical notes, at least not in the way you'd recognize. They're passed down orally with notation systems that look more like cryptic squiggles than sheet music. Neumes, they're called. Not exactly beginner-friendly, but you're starting to internalize them. You know where to breathe, where to rise and fall. Your voice becomes part of a river of sound flowing toward some divine ocean you can't quite see. The service ends. It's barely marked, no grand finale, no applause, obviously. Just a final word, a pause, and then the rustling of robes as everyone rises. Your knees creak in protest. This much kneeling isn't natural, but it's expected. Reverence, they say, is physical. Back in the cloister walkways, the day begins to pick up speed. You pass monks heading to the gardens, others to the scriptorium, one or two toward the infirmary, carrying bundles of herbs. The monastery isn't just a spiritual center, it's a full-on organism. Everyone has a role. Everyone has work. And while prayer is central, you can't exactly pray a cabbage out of the ground. Manual labor is seen as a divine duty, a form of humility and purification. Still, the body aches, and the schedule doesn't care. You're assigned to the scriptorium today. Not the worst gig. You're not out digging ditches or cleaning latrines. Instead, you get to sit inside, still cold mind you, and copy text onto parchment with painstaking care. It's quiet work, meditative, also deeply unforgiving. One slip of the quill, and you've ruined an entire folio. Parchment isn't cheap, and neither is ink. You dip your quill. The ink is a mix of oak gall iron salts and gum arabic thick, almost syrupy. It smells metallic and a little earthy. You scratch out the first line of Psalm 27, careful with your Latin Dominus illuminatio mea. The Lord is my light. It's beautiful in its own way. Not just the words, but the act of making them permanent. You're preserving the sacred word by sacred word. One day someone might read this page in a distant monastery, or more likely spill stew on it. Still, you give it your best. The hours pass without you noticing. Time in the scriptorium flows differently. It stretches and folds depending on the rhythm of your strokes. And then, like clockwork, because it literally is, the bell rings again. That bell rules everything. Its sound is deep metallic and oddly calming, like a parent who never raises their voice but always gets their way. You don't even flinch when it sounds anymore. You just rise, cap your ink, clean your quill, and follow the others back toward the chapel. It's time for terce, the third canonical hour of the day, even though it's closer to 9 in the morning. The numbering system doesn't care much for modern logic. You chant again. You kneel again. And somehow your voice holds steady even as your stomach reminds you it's still hungry. This is your life now. A loop of bells, prayers, work, and repetition. And within that repetition, a strange peace begins to grow. You're not sure if it's enlightenment or just learned helplessness, but either way, you're feeling it. You step out of the chapel after terce and blink at the brightness. It's full morning now, sunlight pouring down on the inner courtyard, like someone finally turned on the sky's lantern. You squint your eyes, still not adjusted to more than candlelight and shadows, and feel the sudden rush of warmth on your cheeks. The sun doesn't visit often here. Tucked deep in some remote part of England or Normandy or the Alps, you've lost track. But when it does, it almost feels like a reward. Don't get too comfortable, though. It's time for labor. Manual labor isn't just encouraged in monastic life, it's required. Idleness is the enemy of the soul, Saint Benedict wrote. And that sentiment is enforced with all the subtlety of a shovel to the ribs. You're sent to the garden today, where the soil is damp and the weeds are plotting a comeback. You grab a spade from the tool shed, its wooden handle smoothed from years of obedient hands, and trudge toward the vegetable beds. There's a rhythm to it, this work. Dig, lift, drop, pull. Your back protests, your knees squish into mud, and your hands sting from cold, but something about it feels right. Here, surrounded by rows of cabbage carrots and surprisingly hostile-looking turnips, you can let your thoughts drift. The monastery has to be self-sufficient. No trips to the market, no Amazon Prime, no quick run for snacks. What you eat, you grow. What you wear, you spin. What you need, you build with your own blistered hands. That includes vegetables, of course, but also herbs, grains, even bees for honey, if your abbey's fancy enough. Historians still argue whether monks were more effective as agricultural innovators or merely lucky beneficiaries of surplus labor. Either way, monastic lands tended to be unusually productive, and many monasteries became economic powerhouses as a result. You, however, are not thinking about medieval economics as you dig another trench. You're mostly just trying not to fall face first into a squash vine. And while we're talking about powerhouses, fun fact, some monasteries had elaborate fish ponds, complete with controlled water systems and breeding strategies. Why? Because fish were technically allowed during fasting days, while meat wasn't. The line between piety and protein intake was often negotiable. Your fellow monks are scattered across the grounds. Brother Reginald is repairing a fence with the careful intensity of someone defusing a bomb. A pair of novices are hauling compost, clearly regretting their life choices. The older monks move slower but steadier, like they've made peace with the idea that this is forever. And then there's you, new enough to still get blisters, old enough to know better than to complain. After a few hours, your arms feel like jelly, and your knees are a crime scene. You wipe your forehead on your sleeve, which just smears dirt across your face, and pause to stretch. The bell rings again, your new favorite sound, and you nearly weep with gratitude. It's time for sext, the midday prayer, and more importantly, the main meal. You clean off quickly at the wash basin, though clean is generous. A splash of cold water, a quick rinse of your hands, and a half-hearted swipe at your face with a linen towel that's seen better centuries. Then it's back to the refectory where food awaits. And here's the kicker. It's basically breakfast again, just slightly larger. More bread, a thin vegetable stew, sometimes lentils, sometimes peas, sometimes a mysterious grayish paste that everyone pretends is fine. You've developed a new appreciation for salt. You've also learned to lower your expectations dramatically. Today's stew is tolerable. Warm, at least. You soak the crusty bread in it until it softens enough not to crack a molar. Once again, silence reigns. The same reader from earlier is still reading aloud now about the martyrdom of some poor saint who got roasted alive on a gridiron. You glance down at your bowl and try not to connect the dots. You finish the meal and bow your head in silent thanks. Not because you're overcome with gratitude necessarily, but because that's what you do. Routine is everything here. Predictable, sacred, and slightly maddening. Back outside, you're reassigned to the workshop for the afternoon. Time for carpentry, another essential skill in a self-contained world. You join the others in the low-roofed building that smells of sawdust and sweat. Brother Hugo hands you a plane and gestures at a stack of roughly cut boards. Repairs for the cloister walkways. You nod and get to work. It's loud in here relatively. Wood scraping against wood hammers, tapping someone sneezing, and then apologizing to no one in particular. The air is thick with effort. You fall into the pattern again, sanding, planing, measuring. It's repetitive, but in a way that calms your brain. You focus on straight lines, clean edges, small victories, and there's a certain pride in it too. You're not building cathedrals, but the things you make will outlast you. A repaired bench, a smooth railing, even a bookstand for the chapel. These aren't just objects, they're offerings. Still, the work is tiring. Your muscles ache, your back groans, your hands are nicked with tiny cuts. You're thinking longingly of your cell when the bell rings again, for none the 9th hour, even though it's really around 3 p.m. Don't ask. Monks and math had their differences. You head back to the chapel once again, lining up for prayer. By now the rhythm of the divine office is so ingrained you could chant in your sleep. You probably have. The Psalms wash over you, familiar and slightly hypnotic. You close your eyes. Not to nap, definitely not to nap, but just to focus. That's your story anyway. Afterward, there's a pause. A breath. The kind of lull that feels luxurious in a world this tightly wound. You return briefly to your cell. Sit on the edge of your cot. Stretch. You're not alone. Several monks do the same, scattered across their tiny quarters, taking a moment to breathe. It's not meditation exactly, but something like it. A moment between gears. You're starting to realize something. Beneath the harsh routine, the cold floors, the constant bells, there's a strange kind of order. A quiet logic. The world outside might be filled with war plague, famine, and God knows what else, but here, time bends into a ritual, and that ritual becomes a shield. Not a perfect one, but still, a kind of peace. By now, late afternoon drapes itself lazily across the courtyard, and the monastery begins to exhale. You feel it in the air, the tension loosens just a bit. There's still plenty to do, of course, but the relentless momentum of morning has ebbed. The light gets gold-tinged and sleepy, and the sounds soften, less hammering, fewer shovels, more footfalls on stone, and the rustle of robes in the wind. You pass through the cloister, your shadow elongated like a ghost, pacing just behind you. You're headed to study now. Or more precisely, spiritual reading, a time blocked off not for rest, but for quiet intellectual effort. You don't get to choose the book, there's no suggestion shelf or cozy reading nook with a cup of cocoa. You get what you're given, and today it's a well-thumbed copy of The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius, a classic. Also a real downer. Still, you open the cracked parchment cover and settle into your seat in the scriptorium, where the light from narrow windows paints pale stripes across the dusty floor. You squint down at the Latin text. Boethius unjustly imprisoned and musing on fate, fortune, and the deceptive promises of worldly happiness. Not exactly beach reading, but it fits the vibe. Historians still argue whether Boethius's philosophical musings genuinely comforted medieval minds, or merely confirmed their suspicions that life was indeed one long slog toward divine judgment. But monks read it again, and now here you are, following in the ink-stained footprints of centuries. To be fair, there's something soothing in the predictability of it all. Misery, reflection, gradual spiritual transcendence. Sounds familiar. From time to time, you glance up at the others. Some are reading silently, lips moving without sound. Others are copying pages, their quills whispering against parchment. A few are sketching marginalia, small illustrations tucked between blocks of text. One monk, Brother Gervais, has been known to sneak in drawings of rabbits jousting with carrots. Technically frowned upon, quietly admired. You go back to your reading. The words blur slightly. Maybe it's the failing light. Maybe it's that creeping drowsiness that comes from a day spent chanting, hoeing, and kneeling. You shift in your seat. Then you feel it, a trickle of calm, like warm syrup down your spine. You're tired, but you're not anxious. Everything you need is within these walls. No decisions, no deadlines. Just a bell, a task, a prayer. Eventually the bell rings again, pulling you out of Boethius's well of philosophical despair. Time for Vespers, the evening prayer. This one feels different. The light in the chapel is dimmer, the air cooler. Candles flicker, casting shaky halos on the faces of your brothers. It's beautiful, but in a way that whispers, not shouts. Like the monastery itself, humble and unmoved. You line up in the choir stalls, take your place, and begin to chant. Your voice joins the others in the low, measured cadence of evening psalms. By now, the rhythm is automatic. The notes unspool without effort, a second language your body knows better than your mind. And in the quiet corners of your soul, something stirs. Not joy exactly, not revelation, just peace. And then, like clockwork, the prayer ends. You bow, file out. The day's nearly done, and the monastery begins to fold inward. The pace slows further. Conversations, if any, are murmured. Even the birds in the courtyard seem to respect the hush. You head to the washroom to clean up before supper. It's a communal space, narrow basins along the wall, a pitcher of cold water, and a communal linen cloth that feels more spiritual than sanitary. You splash your face, scrub your hands, and dry off on a corner that isn't already damp. Then it's back to the refectory. The evening meal is smaller than lunch, which was already barely a meal to begin with. A bit of gruel, maybe a cooked root or two. If it's a feast day, there might be a small portion of fish, or on scandalously special days, a hint of wine. Today, not a feast day. The gruel is thin, the carrots are soft, and the silence is ironclad. As you eat, the reader at the front continues his narration now from The Dialogues of Gregory the Great. A tale about Saint Benedict performing a miracle involving a shattered wine cup. Classic Benedict, always turning broken things into metaphors. You quietly finish your bowl, wondering if he ever had to eat this many turnips. Here's a quirky little tidbit you didn't expect. When you first arrived, monks used to employ a subtle sign language during meals since talking was forbidden. Want the salt, mimic sprinkling. Want more bread, mime slicing. Want out of monastic life entirely. Sadly, no hand sign for that. You've learned the gestures well by now, enough to communicate without breaking the silence. It's like monastic charades, but with higher stakes and worse prizes. After supper, there's a brief moment for private prayer or walking in the cloister. You often choose the walk. The evening air is crisp, the sky now darkening into a violet sheet above you. The stone corridor encircles the open garden, and your sandals echo with each step. You walk slowly. Breathe deeply. Watch the stars begin to flicker into life overhead. You think of your old life, the one you left behind, its chaos, its hunger, its noise. You traded that world for this silence, for structure, for devotion. Sometimes you miss the noise, but mostly you don't. The bell rings one last time before the final prayer. It's a soft call, less insistent. As if even the bell knows the day is almost done. You gather again in the chapel for Compline. The light is low. Candles line the altar. The chants are slower, now gentler. The final psalms are laced with imagery of protection, of rest, of surrendering to sleep in the arms of the divine. You chant with a softer voice, not because you're tired though you are, but because Compline demands a hush. It is the monastery's bedtime lullaby asking God to guard the sleepers, to forgive the day's mistakes, to grant peace until morning. Historians still argue whether this final prayer had a tangible effect on monkish sleep cycles or was more of a symbolic benediction. Either way, it feels right. The chant ends. You bow one last time slower than before and file out quietly. You return to your cell, the little stone box that now feels almost welcoming. You change into your nightrobe, pull the thin wool blanket over you, and lie still. No candle, no book, no distractions, just the cold breath of night and the faint memory of chant humming in your chest. You breathe slowly. You close your eyes. Tomorrow the bell will ring again. Your eyes flicker open before the bell rings, just barely. For a moment, you're not sure why. There's no dream pulling you awake, no noise or sudden jolt. It's as if your body just knows. Maybe it's the silence itself, the thick velvet of pre-dawn that nudges you to the surface like a whisper in a cave. You lie still in the dark, waiting for the inevitable. And there it is. The bell tolls matins. It's still the middle of the night, somewhere between midnight and 2, depending on the liturgical calendar or the mood of whoever winds the bell rope. You sit up with a groan, only partially spiritual. The stone floor is even colder than your thoughts, and your joints protest, like you're 100 years old, even though you're probably closer to 25. You throw on your cloak and shuffle toward the chapel candlelight, bobbing ahead of you in the hands of another monk already halfway there. No one speaks. No one coughs. The silence is now so baked into your bones, it feels louder than words. The cloister is dim and dripping with dew. Somewhere an owl hoots late to bed or early to wake, who can say? Inside the chapel, matins begins. This isn't a prayer, it's a saga. Dozens of psalms readings, responses, and ancient chants unfold, like a medieval mixtape of sacred melancholy. If Compline was a lullaby, matins is a dark symphony. You chant until your throat is raw. Pause only to bow or kneel and then chant again. And yes, you're tired. You're so tired that you start to hallucinate brief conversations with your own robe. But there's something strange in that exhaustion, a doorway to another mindset. Sleepiness flattens the ego. You're not thinking about what time it is or what comes next. You just are. You chant. You breathe. You chant some more. Historians still argue whether this state of semi-conscious devotion brought monks closer to mystical experience or merely pushed them toward long-term spiritual burnout. Honestly, both seem plausible at 3 in the morning. You return to your cell briefly after matins, a rare crack in the otherwise relentless flow of the day. If you're lucky, there's a little time before the bell rings for lauds. And if you're really lucky, your cell is warmer than a meat locker. You lie down again, but you don't sleep, at least not deeply. Just a strange floating rest, like you've learned to dream with one eye open. Lauds arrives soon enough, heralded by another echoing bell. You rise again, slower this time, body creaking like an old bookshelf. You wrap your cloak tighter and return to the chapel as the first gray streaks of morning appear in the sky. Lauds is shorter than matins, but feels sharper somehow, like the monastery has collectively exhaled its weariness and is now inhaling purpose again. These prayers are focused on light, on dawn, on renewal. Psalms about the breaking day, about vigilance, about a world that's beginning again for the 1000th time. The candles flicker lower, their light now competing with the slow emergence of real sunlight outside. You catch it through one of the chapel's narrow lancet windows, a beam of gold slicing through the stone gloom like some divine theater spotlight. Dust dances in it, tiny motes swirling in their private little ballet. After lauds, it's time for another quick wash and then prime. That early morning rhythm you've now internalized like muscle memory. You barely notice it anymore. Splash. Dry. Robe straight. Chapel. Chant. Bow. Repeat. Then you receive your daily task. This time you're sent to the scriptoria. At first glance, this seems like a gift from the heavens. No digging, no carrying logs, just sitting quietly and writing. How hard can that be? Spoiler alert, very. The scriptorium is cold. It always is. The walls are thick stone and the narrow windows are designed to keep heat out as effectively as they keep warmth in. You sit at your desk, quill in hand, ink pot, carefully nestled in its little holder, and a page of fresh parchment spread out before you like a promise. Your job today: copying a section of The Rule of Saint Benedict. Because nothing says fun like handwriting a centuries-old instruction manual for your own lifestyle. Your hand begins to cramp almost immediately. The quill catches on the fibers of the parchment. You blot the ink, wince at a smudge, and start over. Again and again. Precision is everything. No whiteout, no cottrell plus zil. Mistakes are patched with clever scraping and prayer. Mostly prayer. Quirky aside, in some scriptoria, scribes would slip in little notes at the ends of manuscripts. Things like, "Thank God this is finished," or "This parchment is hairy." You spot one scratched faintly in the margin from a previous monk. "Cold is my hand, and pain is my back." You feel seen. You work through the morning interrupted only by terse, which you now half anticipate like a sneeze. The bell rings, you shuffle back to the chapel, you chant with cracked lips, then return to your wooden desk. Time dilates here. An hour feels like 4. A paragraph feels like a mile. The ink begins to freeze in its well. Still, there's something meditative in it. You fall into the curves of the letters, the careful attention each one demands. The way the ink settles, the way the parchment accepts it like a solemn handshake. You're not just copying words, you're preserving ideas. You're etching permanence into a fragile world. Historians still debate whether most medieval monks truly understood the texts they copied, or if they simply became master imitators of forms. You suspect it's both. You grasp the shape of the words better than their deeper meaning. But the act of writing itself feels holy, as if truth can flow through your fingers even if your mind is half asleep. By mid-afternoon, the work is paused for sext and a small meal. You eat in silence as always. Another bowl of watery stew, though today there's a rare chunk of something suspiciously firm in it. Root vegetable bread scrap. Blessed mystery. You chew and move on. After sext, you return to the scriptorium for a little while longer, your body now protesting in new and exciting ways. Cramped fingers, slouched spine, ink-stained wrists. Brother Peter across from you has a tiny ink blot on the tip of his nose and doesn't know it. You don't tell him. You're not a monster, but you need small amusements. Finally, as none approaches, the bell rings again. You stretch your legs, grateful for any excuse to stand up. Your knees crack. Your back sings a mournful dirge. But in that oddly proud way. You've endured another stretch of stillness and silence, and left something behind in ink that will outlive you by centuries. Outside, the sun has moved. The air smells of dust and lavender. The walls of the cloister glow faintly gold. Another piece of the day falls into place. You shuffle out of the scriptorium with the peculiar gait of someone who's just spent hours contorted like a pretzel over a desk the size of a suitcase lid. Your legs are numb, your spine feels about 3 inches shorter, and you're fairly certain there's ink on your ear. Again, the bell that rang for none still hums faintly in your ears as you head toward the chapel. At this point in the day, you don't even need to think about where you're going. Your body moves on muscle memory guided by the ritual choreography drilled into your bones. Left at the cloister garden, through the wooden arch, past Brother Edric, who somehow always looks suspiciously well-rested. None pronounced like known, not none just to keep things confusing, isn't the most thrilling of the liturgical hours. It's short. It's quiet. It's almost shy. The sun hangs just past its zenith now, the afternoon light slanting in through the chapel windows like divine fingers gently prodding you awake. You chant. You bow. You close your eyes for a moment longer than you should between verses. No one notices, or maybe they're too tired to care. Historians still argue whether the structure of these daily prayer intervals was originally meant to align with the ancient Roman work schedule, or whether it evolved organically from the spiritual needs of early monastic communities. Either way, your modern brain has now been trained to divide time not by hours or deadlines, but by bells and chants. You don't check a clock. You check the sky. After none, there's a pause. Not a break, mind you. There's no such thing here as breaks, but there's breathing room. And in that space, your next assignment arrives: the garden. Don't get too excited. It's not a meditative stroll among roses. It's weeding. Always weeding. You grab a spade and head outside the sun, warming your scalp beneath your hood. The monastery garden is utilitarian, not aesthetic. Think more medieval Home Depot than Versailles. Rows of cabbages, leeks, onions, herbs, beans, and enough garlic to ward off a small vampire convention. You kneel beside a patch of unruly chard and start your battle. Dirt gets under your fingernails instantly. Your knees sink into the earth, your spine realigns itself with each motion, and your mind begins to drift because weeding, as it turns out, is one of the few things that lets your thoughts wander without guilt. You remember that line from The Rule of Saint Benedict: "Idleness is the enemy of the soul." Brother Matthew quotes it whenever someone lingers too long at the cloister fountain or watches the birds too intently. But out here, hands deep in the soil, you feel anything but idle. You're working, you're sweating, you're living out some ancient monastic fantasy of closeness to the earth. And you're getting extremely acquainted with the life cycle of dandelions. There's a rumor that Brother Simon once named all the weeds in his quadrant and would quietly apologize to them as he yanked them out. He's since been reassigned to cellar duty. Coincidence, maybe. You wipe your brow and keep going. The bees buzz lazily around the marigolds. A pair of pigeons land briefly on the stone wall and seem to consider whether they too want to join the order. You find a worm the size of your pinky toe and relocate it to a safer patch of dirt, which is to say, one you're not about to rip apart, and still no words are spoken. Not because you're alone, others are nearby hoeing or planting, but because this part of the day doesn't need words. The silence is comfortable, like a blanket stretched across the garden rows. Occasionally someone coughs. Occasionally someone mutters a psalm verse under their breath, either as devotion or as a way to track time. Occasionally you imagine a world where monks communicate solely through grunts and interpretive hoe dancing. It's a long afternoon. Eventually the bell rings again. Vespers. You stretch upright, brush dirt off your robes, and return the tools to their hooks. Your hands are stained, your back aches, and there's a suspicious beetle hitchhiking on your sleeve. You flick it off gently. Even beetles deserve mercy. Vespers feels warmer somehow. Maybe it's the lingering sun. Maybe it's the satisfaction of physical labor behind you. The chants are familiar now, like songs you once forgot and now know by heart again. The psalms flow from your lips without thought, and your voice blends seamlessly with the others, dozens of human threads woven into a single sacred sound. This time you notice something. A high harmony, faint but steady, drifting from Brother Thomas. He's old, nearly blind, but his voice is crystal. You hadn't really heard it before, not like this. It lifts the chant ever so slightly, like a shimmer on water. And for a fleeting moment, your spine tingles. Not from cold. Not from fatigue. From wonder. Historians still puzzle over how monasteries cultivated such intricate musical traditions with minimal formal instruction. Some chalk it up to repetition. Others suggest divine inspiration. But in this moment, it just feels like belonging. Like this sound has always been part of you waiting to be sung. After Vespers supper. It's still basic, some lentils, a heel of bread, maybe a chunk of root vegetable you've seen too many times this week. But there's also hot water for tea tonight. Not always available. You savor the heat like it's wine. Maybe better than wine. You catch Brother Hugh making the sign for more bread and mentally award him points for the dramatic hand flourish. Some monks are artists in other ways. As always, a reading continues during the meal. This time it's a tale from the Golden Legend. A hagiography so packed with bizarre stories, it could give modern tabloids a run for their money. Tonight's selection's Saint Christina the Astonishing, who reportedly levitated to avoid smelling sinners. You stifle a snort. You are for better or worse among sinners yourself, if only by the standards of ascetic perfection. You finish your bowl, listen dutifully, and offer a silent prayer that levitating never becomes a required skill in the rule. Once the meal ends, you're granted a few moments of free time, though the word free is doing heavy lifting here. You can walk the cloister, reflect read, or do quiet manual labor. Tonight, you choose the walk. Again, the sky is pinking at the edges, the sun settling behind the distant trees like a sleepy ember. Your footsteps echo gently on the flagstones. You count them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, turn. 1, 2, 3, pause. And you wonder, is this what peace is? Not the absence of noise, but the presence of rhythm. And then the final bell of the day. Compline again. You head toward the chapel, shoulders heavy, but heart strangely light. Tomorrow it all begins again, and you're okay with that. You can already feel the shift in the air as Compline draws to a close. The last chant lingers like incense in your chest, its final note dissolving into silence more sacred than the words themselves. The chapel is dark now, lit only by a few guttering candles, and your breath seems louder than it should be. There's a bowed head to your left, another to your right. The faces, even in their near-identical cowls, have begun to carve themselves into your memory. Brother Edric with the tick in his right eye. Brother Thomas with his whispery chant and gnarled hands. Even Brother Simon, who may or may not have once argued with a vegetable. You're a part of this quiet constellation, every voice a star in orbit around the same invisible gravity. And now, grand silence begins. From this moment until after the next morning's lauds, not a word is to be spoken, not whispered, not muttered, not even a polite throat clearing that might be interpreted as a phoneme. You lower your gaze, the official cue for "Yep, we're done here," and rise from the chapel bench. Feet pad softly on stone. Sandal soles meeting ancient flagstones, each one worn smooth by centuries of equally tired monks walking the same path you now follow. Back to your cell, back to stillness. The cloister is a ribbon of shadows, moonlight threading through its arches like silk. The cold has thickened now, coating your hands in an invisible crust. You draw your robe tighter, not from discomfort, but from ritual instinct. Every motion slow, every breath measured. The night outside wraps around the monastery like a closed fist, and yet inside these walls it's open. That's the strange paradox of grand silence. At first it feels like suffocation. You want to whisper, to joke, To say, did you hear Brother Matthew snore during none again, but you don't. You can't. So you fall into it instead like sleep, like surrender. Historians still debate whether the enforcement of grand silence was primarily for contemplation, or simply a handy way to prevent nocturnal gossip and drama. One wonders how many passive-aggressive glances got tossed over the chamber pot in a world without late-night venting. You reach your cell and step inside. A flickering stub of candle is all you have to see by. The room is smaller than most modern closets. A plank bed, a wooden stool, a shelf with 2 books, one of which you suspect may be more spiderweb than paper. A tiny cross on the wall, and silence. You sit on the bed and breathe. There is something deeply strange about hearing your own heartbeat this clearly. It's the only sound now aside from the wind nipping at the shutters. You begin to strip off your outer robe, folding it neatly at the foot of your bed. Underneath is your night tunic, woolen, scratchy, and absolutely not designed for comfort. You slide under the rough blanket. It doesn't so much warm you as it politely prevents hypothermia. You lie there, still, and think, or try not to. That's the other aspect of grand silence they don't mention. The words may stop, but your thoughts do not. They roar louder. Every guilt you've buried under chants and chores resurfaces like weeds after rain. Did you pray sincerely during terce? Did you take too many peas from the common pot at supper? Did your mind wander during that really long psalm at lauds? Absolutely, probably, definitely. And yet you know that's part of it. The silence is meant to strip you bare. Not for shame, but for honesty. There's no one to lie to in here. Not even yourself. You remember one of the elder brothers, Brother Aldwin, once telling you that grand silence is like taking your soul in for a service check. You don't always know what's wrong, but if you listen long enough, you'll hear the squeaks. Some monks reportedly had visions during this time. Angels appearing in the corners of the cell. Ghosts of saints whispering secrets. Or maybe it was sleep deprivation and candle fumes. Hard to tell. Historians still argue whether these visions were genuinely mystical or more akin to medieval dream logic crossed with untreated migraines. Tonight your vision is more practical. You see your own hands in your mind, ink-stained, calloused, trembling slightly. You see the garden, its rows, waiting. You see the chapel waiting too, and slowly the silence begins to change. It's no longer absence, it's presence. Not a void, but a fullness. Like the night is keeping you company. You begin to drift. Your eyelids are heavier now, your thoughts slower. You think of your family far away, who perhaps believe you're spending your days in constant bliss or holy ecstasy. You think of your old life, whatever shreds of it remain, shoes that fit better, laughter that came easier, nights where silence wasn't sacred, just awkward. But you don't miss it the way you thought you would. The stillness has carved out a shape in your heart, and that shape fits here. You're not asleep yet, not quite. Somewhere in the cloister a board creaks. A soft thump, maybe a door closing gently, and then nothing again. The monastery returns to its breathless hush. You shift under the blanket. The straw-stuffed mattress crunches faintly like footsteps in dry leaves. And now you're warm. Just barely. Just enough. One final moment clings to your thoughts, the candle flickering its last gasp before it dies. The room surrenders to the dark completely, and then you sleep. Sort of. Sleep here doesn't always come easily. Or deeply. Sometimes it feels more like a polite nod to the idea of rest. But your body is learning. Learning how to rest in rhythm, learning how to breathe in silence, learning how to listen without ears. And outside the monastery slumbers, silent, steady, timeless. You wake before the bell, not on purpose, of course. No one chooses to wake up at this hour unless they're a rooster or a monk. But here you are, blinking into the darkness, your breath forming little clouds above your face. Cold. Still. Too early to be considered sane, too late to fall back asleep. The silence hasn't lifted yet. Grand silence remains in effect until after lauds. So you shift quietly, folding your blanket with minimal rustle and reaching for your robe. Every movement feels exaggerated in this pre-dawn world, like you're inside some monastic spy film, the cloister identity, perhaps. Your feet find the cold floor and instantly regret it. You fumble for your sandals and mentally prepare for another lap around the eternal wheel of the daily schedule. You're not sure if you ever stopped being tired. It just becomes a different kind of tired, reshaped with each bell. You open the door of your cell and step into the corridor. A single oil lamp flickers at the far end, casting long, exaggerated shadows. Somewhere someone coughs. Someone else stifles a yawn. It's a small parade of hooded figures trudging wordlessly toward the chapel like mourners at a particularly quiet funeral. Yours, maybe. Inside the chapel, lauds begins. The chanting feels thicker in the early morning. Maybe it's the acoustics. Maybe it's your foggy brain. Maybe it's because your vocal cords still think they're off duty. But when the first notes rise, they wrap around you like a blanket that's more spiritual than thermal. Lauds meant to mark the coming dawn is both a celebration and a submission. Light is coming even if your eyes still sting from darkness. It's hope in plainchant. And as your voice joins the others, you're reminded again how this music isn't about performance. It's about presence. One historical theory claims these early hours were chosen specifically to counteract laziness. Make a man rise in darkness to praise, and he won't sleep away his sins. Another theory suggests it was simply the natural result of agricultural life up before the sun work, with the light prey through it all. Historians still argue which came first, the devotion or the discipline. You're not sure it matters. Both feel real when you're swaying slightly from lack of sleep and trying to stay on pitch. After Laud's grand silence ends not with a bang, but with a whisper. Someone clears their throat a bit too audibly. Another murmurs a greeting. Voices are back, but still soft, like they remember the hush and aren't quite ready to break it. You head to the refectory. Breakfast is, well, humble. A crust of yesterday's bread, maybe a smear of butter if you're lucky, and hot water that occasionally passes as tea. The good news is that no one expects lively conversation. Most of you eat mechanically, heads down, eyes, still adjusting to the presence of day. Brother Cuthbert says nothing but sneezes 6 times in a row. It's a thing he does. Everyone ignores it politely. Then the real work of the day begins, manual labor. And today, you've drawn one of the more glamorous assignments, the stables. You don't remember signing up for this, but apparently some cosmic rotation has decided that your morning will be spent communing with the monastery's most fragrant residents. The stable smells like a mixture of hay, damp wool, and moral character building. A few goats bleat as you enter. One of them, a shaggy troublemaker named Basil, eyes you like he remembers the last time you tried to feed him stale cabbage. You get to mucking. It's exactly what it sounds like. Muck and more muck. And then, just when you think you've cleared the last of the muck, surprise, fresh muck. It's like some twisted miracle, the loaves and fishes of stable waste. But even here, something quiet creeps in. The repetition of shovel scrape dump, the rhythm of breath and motion, the occasional snort from a goat or clatter from a horse's hoof. You begin to fall into it, like chanting but with hay bales. Some fringe sources suggest that monks intentionally rotated these labor-intensive duties, not just for fairness, but for spiritual challenge. It's easy to feel holy when copying scripture under candlelight. Less so when you're ankle-deep in yesterday's oats and droppings. But holiness, they'd say, must be tested. You're being forged, shovel by shovel. Eventually, you pause leaning on your broom like it's a staff from some forgotten pilgrimage. The sun has risen properly now, throwing a golden light across the straw-strewn floor. You glance over and catch Basil staring at you. There's a mutual understanding now. You'll both survive this. When the bell rings for terce, you're almost grateful, almost. Back to the chapel. Another pause. Another slice of chant. Another moment to remember why you're here even if you're not always sure. After terce, you get reassigned to the kitchen. This is better. Warmer. Smells like stew and promise. The kitchen hums with activity, slicing, stirring low murmurs about barley ratios. You get tasked with peeling root vegetables, a task so mindless it's practically meditative. The pile is mountainous. The peeler is dull. Your hands quickly grow sore, but you keep at it. At least you're indoors. You find yourself humming a line from Lauds, and before you know it, Brother Julian joins in from across the table. It's barely a duet, just fragments, but it's oddly comforting. Like you're both reaching out across the morning haze with notes instead of words. Historians sometimes point out that monastic kitchens were places of subtle rebellion. Recipe changes, food swaps, tiny indulgences slipped past the prior. A little honey added to oat porridge, an extra turnip accidentally diced into the stew. Nothing sinful. Just human. You scrape the last of the parsnips into a bowl and wipe your hands on your robe. The stew smells hearty. You're proud of it even if you know it'll taste like medieval beige. Back in the refectory, the meal is served. No talking. Just eating and the ever-present drone of a reading today from a text about St. Cuthbert and the miracle of the incorrupt body. The younger novices glance up at that eyes wide. You resist the urge to whisper, he's still in the cellar. PG-13 jokes only after all. You eat slowly, mindfully. Every bite a form of gratitude. Not just for food, but for quiet. For the rhythm. For the fact that even in a day carved up by bells and rules, there's still room to breathe. After the meal, you rise, bow slightly, and carry your bowl to the wash station. Another ritual, another small offering in the long litany of daily life. Then the bell again. The next task awaits, and you go not because you're told, but because by now your soul knows the way. You don't even flinch when the bell rings this time. Your body just moves almost on autopilot. You're learning the language of the bells now, like some ancient Morse code tapped directly into your bones. This one is for sext, the 6th hour of the day, give or take. Midday prayer. Another circuit in the spiral of sacred time. You wipe your hands on your robe, still stained from parsnips and questionable beets, and make your way back to the chapel. The sun is high now, slanting through the narrow windows, turning dust motes into golden confetti. The chapel feels warmer than it did at Lauds, less like a tomb, more like a sun-drenched cocoon. You slip into your usual spot. Brother Edric's tick is twitching merrily beside you, like it too is singing a silent hymn. You join the chanting, your voice rough but steady. The rhythm of sext is slower, more spacious. It's designed for a body already slightly worn from morning labor. A breath, a bow, a line, a pause. Every part of you moving, not with effort, but with surrender. You're no longer fighting the structure. You're flowing with it. Sext was traditionally seen as a time of temptation. Noon heat, weary limbs, wandering minds. Historians still argue whether this specific prayer hour was created to combat lustful thoughts or to interrupt the post-lunch nap spiral. Either way, you find yourself yawning on cue. The chant ends, and for a moment, no one moves. The stillness stretches deliciously long, like the final notes of a lullaby. Then you rise, file out silently, and step back into the daylight. Now comes a sliver of free time. Sort of. Free is generous. You can't exactly Netflix and chill in a medieval monastery. But there's a precious window where you're not scrubbing cauldrons or wrestling with goats, and you get to choose within limits how to spend it. You decide to walk. The cloister garden is your sanctuary within the sanctuary. Enclosed by stone laced with the scents of rosemary and wild mint, it's the closest thing you have to leisure. The path is worn and circular like the rest of your life now. You walk slowly, hands clasped behind your back, pretending to contemplate a particularly righteous lettuce. Other monks drift through each one in their own little world of silence or mumbling prayer. Brother Simon is talking softly to a cabbage again. Classic. There's something oddly modern about this part of monastic life. A microdose of mindfulness. A medieval retreat center. Here the goal isn't productivity. It's presence. You pause by the well in the center of the garden, its stones moss-covered and cool. You peer in, half expecting to see a holy relic or the face of a saint staring back at you. Nope. Just your reflection. Tired. A little smudged. But calm. Some monks use their free time to write. Others illuminated manuscripts filling the margins with doodles of rabbits jousting or priests being chased by snails. Historians still puzzle over the symbolism in these illustrations. Were they satire, prayerful whimsy, or low-key medieval memes? You like to imagine some monk hiding a smiling cat in the corner, hoping a future reader would chuckle in Latin. You return to your cell briefly. Just enough time to check your copy of the Psalms, adjust your robe, and splash cold water on your face. Your reflection in the basin looks slightly more alert now. Slightly. And then comes none. Yes, the prayer hour. Not the number. It's pronounced non, in case you've been internally rhyming it with cone this whole time. A common rookie mistake. None or the 9th hour marks mid-afternoon. The sun has begun its descent, and with it comes the sense of a slow exhale. The day is no longer climbing. It's beginning to fold itself into evening. In the chapel again, the chanting is lower, like the monks are matching their voices to the angle of the light. You feel your shoulders soften. The rigidity of the morning is gone, replaced by a kind of tired grace. And then something unusual happens. Brother Julian stumbles over a line in the chant. Just slightly. A crack in the rhythm. A misplaced note. But in this world, it's like hearing a record skip during a lullaby. A few heads tilt, a couple brows furrow, but no one says a word. The chant continues, smooths itself. It's like the moment never happened, except you saw it, he saw it, and later you'll probably both laugh about it with raised eyebrows and mock scandal. Quietly, of course. You leave the chapel blinking into the afternoon sun. It's lower now, stretched across the monastery walls in golden sheets. A breeze kicks up, carrying the scent of beeswax and sweat and soil. You inhale deeply, like you can draw strength from the air itself. Now it's time for more work. Today's task, scriptorium duty. The holy grail of monk assignments. Literal books. You nearly skip. The scriptorium is a wide, well-lit room with wooden desks lined in neat rows. Quills, inkpots, and parchment abound. The light streams through the high windows, perfect for squinting at tiny letters. You take your seat. You dip your quill. You begin to copy. It's tedious. It's perfect. The scratching of quills is like tiny crickets. Every monk bent over their work, lost in the sacred art of transcription. You're copying a passage from Augustine, trying not to smudge your ink or fall into a trance from the rhythm. The page begins to fill. A single mistake, and you have to scrape the parchment clean with a knife and start again. No pressure. It's like extreme calligraphy with the judgment of eternity hovering over your shoulder. But there's beauty in it. In each perfect curve of a letter, you're preserving something ancient, something eternal. One fringe story tells of a monk who fell asleep while illuminating a manuscript, and dreamt that an angel completed the rest of the page. When he woke, the art was flawless, otherworldly. Historians, ever the buzzkills, suggest he may have just been more talented than he realized, or hallucinating on moldy bread. You keep scratching, keep copying, your fingers cramp. You don't stop, and then the bell rings. Time melts. You've finished a page, and maybe it's good enough for an angel. The bell pulls you away from the scriptorium's gentle sanctuary like a rude awakening. It's time for Vespers, the evening prayer that gathers all the day's worn-out souls back to the chapel. You trudge over your legs, stiff from hours, hunched over manuscripts, fingers still stained with ink. The scent of candle wax and polished wood greets you, mingling with the faintest trace of damp robes and the echo of whispered prayers. Inside, the light is softer now, flickering flames casting dancing shadows that seem to bend and sway with the chanting. The community gathers in a semicircle, faces worn and peaceful voices weaving together in unison. Vespers is different from lauds and the other offices. It's a slow exhale after the day's labor, a gentle surrender to the coming night. The text is familiar, but your voice wobbles slightly. Maybe it's fatigue, or maybe the solemnity of the hour. You glance sideways at Brother Cuthbert, who's nodding along like this is the best part of his day. Or maybe the only part he can tolerate without falling asleep. One quirky detail about Vespers: some monasteries used to ring their bells in a unique pattern for this hour. 3 slow chimes, followed by a rapid 6, then a soft toll. This wasn't just for timekeeping, but also to mimic the Trinity and the 6 days of creation. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was, and whether it was meant more for monks or the laypeople living nearby. The chant swells and softens. Your throat feels raw, but you keep going, trying to blend your tiredness into the music. It's almost hypnotic. You find yourself picturing the chapel's stone walls, absorbing every note, storing them like ancient vinyl records waiting to spin again tomorrow. After the prayers, the silence lingers just a moment longer before the community disperses. You're not ready to go back to your cell yet. Outside, the sky is painted with the soft oranges and purples of dusk, and a few stars shyly peek out. The air carries the cool promise of night, a reprieve from the day's relentless schedule. You wander towards the infirmary next, curious about how the monastery handles those too tired or ill to follow the punishing routine. The infirmary is a humble space, quiet, except for the occasional cough or the rustle of bandages. A few monks rest there, their faces pale but peaceful. Care is simple herbs, prayer, and rest. Not much different from the rest of the day, just gentler. There's a strange comfort in seeing this side of monastery life, the fragility beneath the discipline. Some fringe accounts say monks believed that physical suffering was a pathway to spiritual clarity, but others argue it was more practical, a recognition of human limits. Historians still argue the balance between piety and pragmatism in medieval healing practices. You leave the infirmary and return to the dormitory hall. The lights are dimmed, the buzz of daytime chatter replaced by soft whispers and the occasional creak of wooden beds settling. The monks prepare for Compline, the final prayer before sleep. Compline is a quiet affair, shorter than the others, but no less significant. The words are gentle, the music slow, almost a lullaby. You sit back, letting the soothing chant wash over you, your eyelids growing heavier with each verse. The fatigue from the day presses down like a thick blanket, warm and oppressive. At the close, the prior speaks a final blessing. The community responds with a murmured Amen, and you file out in silence, the hush settling like a protective cloak. Back in your cell, you prepare for bed. The walls feel closer now, the darkness deeper. The day's schedule, with all its bells, chants, and chores, fades into the background hum of your thoughts. You pull your blanket up and close your eyes, the memory of the chapel's last notes lingering like a soft echo. You probably won't survive this medieval routine without some serious caffeine or a secret stash of chocolate. But for now, you rest wrapped in the quiet chaos of the monastery's sacred rhythm. The night stretches on deeper and quieter than any moment before. You're not asleep yet, not quite, but you're riding the edges of it, suspended in that delicate twilight, where dreams and reality blur. Suddenly, a soft noise breaks the stillness. A rustle from down the hall, a whispered prayer, or maybe just the wind sneaking through a crack in the stone walls. The monks call this the night vigil, a tradition for the especially devout who wake before midnight to pray again, walking the shadowy corridors in silence. You're tempted to join, but your body protests. Still, curiosity wins. You pad softly down the hallway, feeling the cold stone underfoot. The monastery at night is a different world, more mysterious, less governed by the clang of bells and the day's work. In one of the smaller chapels, you glimpse a lone figure kneeling in prayer. The flicker of a candle reveals a face etched with fatigue and fierce devotion. It's Brother Aidan, known for his midnight vigils and tales of hearing angelic choirs in the stillness. You wonder if that's just a poetic way to describe insomnia, or if he really does have some celestial playlist. Historians still argue whether these nocturnal prayers were widespread, or the eccentric hobby of a few zealots. Some say they were designed to combat spiritual laziness. Others think they served more practical purposes like quiet time for reflection. As you quietly retreat, you hear the distant sound of a rooster crowing, a cheeky reminder that dawn will soon be here again, whether you like it or not. You return to your cell, the heavy silence pressing in. Sleep finally claims you, but not before the echo of those night prayers lingers in your mind like a whispered secret. When morning breaks once more, the bell summons you out of bed and into the cycle anew. You realize that living the monastic schedule is less about rigid obedience and more about embracing the quiet chaos of time itself, folding the sacred into every breath, every pause, every step. You might never fully understand it, but you're part of it now, and somehow that's enough. You wake with the faintest light, the pre-dawn chill still lingering in the stone walls. The cycle, relentless, calls you again, matins, the first and longest prayer office. It's the crack of dawn before dawn, that awkward time when the world feels caught between dreams and waking. Dragging yourself from the narrow wooden bed, you pull your robe tight and shuffle toward the chapel, your breath misting in the cold air. The night's shadows cling to the corners, the flicker of candlelight casting long, wavering silhouettes on ancient stone. Matins is a marathon. A long vigil filled with psalms, readings, and silence. Your voice cracks more than usual, but you press on partly because you don't want to be the only one slacking, and partly because you're mesmerized by the solemn cadence echoing through the empty halls. Interestingly, some monasteries timed matins to coincide with the natural cycle of the stars, making it a cosmic kind of devotion. Historians still argue whether this was intentional theology or just happy coincidence. You try to keep your eyes open, but the exhaustion weighs heavy. At one point, you catch Brother Thomas discreetly dozing with his chin on his chest, snoring just softly enough not to get caught. You smile to yourself, monks are human after all. After the final chant, there's a pause, a breath held, as the community waits for the dawn's first light to break the horizon. It feels like the world is holding its breath too. Then slowly light floods the chapel, washing over you like a benediction. You step outside into the crisp morning air, the cool breeze brushing against your skin. The day is new, and the monastery hums with a quiet energy, the soft rustle of robes, the distant clatter of tools beginning their work. You realize the rhythm of the monastic day is less about strict rules and more about a living, breathing dance with time. It's a world where chaos is quiet and silence speaks volumes. With the sun rising, you feel a little lighter, ready to begin the cycle once more, wrapped in the sacred cadence of the monastery's endless day. The sun climbs higher now, and with it, the monastery begins to stir with a subtle, almost imperceptible hustle beneath the surface of quiet. You find yourself pulled into the rhythm of labor again, this time tending the gardens where the monastery's produce is coaxed from the earth. Walking among neat rows of cabbage leeks and herbs, your fingers graze the leaves, feeling the roughness of soil still clinging to them. The scent of earth and growing things is sharp and grounding, an earthy perfume, far removed from the incense and candle wax of the chapel. Gardening was a serious affair here, vital not just for food, but for medicinal herbs. The monks were essentially the original herbalists, mixing remedies from chamomile, sage, and sometimes more exotic plants. You find yourself pondering the strange mix of science, superstition, and faith that made up their healing practices. Historians still argue how much was effective medicine and how much was spiritual placebo. The work is quiet but demanding. You bend weed and harvest all while the bells in the distance mark the passing hours. It's a perfect kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes from moving your body and mind in harmony with the seasons. Around you, other monks chatter softly, exchanging tips on pruning or lamenting the pesky rabbits that seem to outwit their best efforts. There's humor here too. The gardener's lament is universal even in the 12th century. By midday, your hands are rough and your clothes dusted with soil. You pause to sip water from a nearby well, the coolness refreshing against the summer heat. There's a moment of stillness where you almost forget the relentless schedule lost in the rhythm of growing life. This hands-on labor, you realize, balances the contemplative hours. It grounds the day, a physical prayer of sorts. The monks believed that working the earth was a way to honor creation itself, an idea that still resonates. As the bell tolls for sext, you gather your tools, ready to return to the chapel and the cycle of prayers that continues to shape every moment. The monastery's quiet chaos is not just in the schedules or the bells, it's in this delicate balance between work and worship, body and spirit, routine and surprise. And in this balance you find a strange, unexpected peace. The afternoon light wanes, casting long shadows across the cloister as you make your way back from the fields. The air has cooled slightly, carrying hints of wood smoke and distant conversations. You pause for a moment to watch a small group of novices practicing Gregorian chant, their tentative voices wobbling like fledgling birds finding their wings. It strikes you how much patience this life demands, patience with the slow, deliberate unfolding of each day, with your own fumbling steps in prayer and labor, and with the centuries-old rhythms that govern everything. The monastery feels less like a prison and more like a vast living organism, each part pulsing with quiet energy. You enter the refectory where the monks gather for their evening meal. The room is simple but warm, filled with the murmur of soft conversation and the clinking of wooden bowls. The meal itself is modest: bread, cheese, a little stew, but sustains you more than you expected. Food here isn't about indulgence. It's about sustenance, about honoring the gifts of the earth without greed. There's a curious tradition you learn about here. During meals, monks were forbidden from speaking, except to read aloud from a spiritual text. This silent dinner was meant to foster reflection and discipline, but some fringe stories suggest it was also a clever way to avoid awkward mealtime debates over who took the last piece of bread. Historians still debate whether these enforced silences were truly spiritual exercises or just a clever way to keep order among a crowd prone to hunger-induced grumpiness. After the meal, you return to the chapel for Compline once more. The final prayers of the day feel heavier now, weighted with fatigue and the knowledge that the cycle will begin again come dawn. Yet within that heaviness is comfort, the sense of belonging to something larger, a sacred rhythm threading through countless generations. You lie down in your cell afterward, the quiet pressing in around you. Outside, the wind hums softly through the monastery walls, a lullaby sung in stone and shadow. Tomorrow will come. Bells will ring, chants will rise, and you will walk this ancient path once more. But for now, the day folds gently to a close. The final hours of your day slip by in a gentle haze. You sit by the small window of your cell, gazing out at the moon's pale glow washing over the monastery's silhouette. The world outside seems hushed, almost reverent, as if even nature holds its breath for the night's quiet vigil. You reflect on the relentless cycle of bells, prayers, work, and rest, the monastery's heartbeat, pulsing through every stone and soul. It's a rhythm both soothing and maddening, a dance of order amid chaos. The schedule might feel like a strict taskmaster, but within it lies a strange freedom, a chance to surrender to a greater pattern beyond yourself. One last ritual remains: silent prayers before sleep whispered into the dark. You feel the cool air brush your skin, the distant echo of a bell tolling through the night. You breathe in the stillness, let it settle in your bones. You remember something odd you read once: some monks kept tiny clocks or hourglasses by their beds, not for keeping time, but as a reminder of the fleeting nature of life. Time, they believed, was both a gift and a test. Historians still argue whether these objects were common or symbolic artifacts of monastic mindfulness. The monastery, with its quiet chaos, its bells that never stop ringing, its prayers weaving through the hours, is a world apart. Yet it's a place where time slows and speeds all at once, where every moment is an invitation to presence. As you close your eyes, the soft hum of the fan you turned on earlier blends with the imagined chant echoing in your mind. The day's relentless schedule fades into a peaceful, rhythmic pulse. Now you drift part of this endless cycle, at once tired and strangely at peace. The bells have quieted, the chants have softened, and the monastery settles into a gentle hush. You feel the weight of the day lifting, replaced by a soothing calm that wraps around you like a warm blanket. Time here is not just measured by hours or bells, but by the ebb and flow of breath, the soft folding of moments into one another. Let your thoughts slow, your body relax, and your mind drift softly, like the flicker of candlelight in a dark chapel. Remember the sacred rhythm you've walked through, how chaos can be quiet and order can feel like a lullaby. Imagine the stone walls standing steady, the worn paths waiting patiently for the morning. Breathe deeply, gently, releasing any tension, letting the sounds of this quiet place fade into a comforting silence. You are part of something timeless now, a story whispered in shadows, sung softly in prayer, carried on the wings of the night. Rest easy, wrapped in the calm of the monastery's embrace. Sleep well, friend. At end of script. Sweet dreams.